I'm Bhargavi, working as Assistant Professor in the Department of Information Technology from B.V. Raju Institute of Technology, Narsapur. So today I would like to discuss about a topic of exception handling in Python programming. So before going to know about exception handling, just we have a basic idea about what are the general types of errors. So generally there are two types of errors. So syntax error, runtime error. So syntax errors are through invalid syntax. A programmer, if I enter something like if something I equals to 0, if I didn't mention any colon and I write something print of I, so this is a syntax error in Python. After if statement colon is compulsory. So the syntax errors are invalid syntax provided by a programmer. So here the programmer need to correct all the syntactic errors to complete execution. So to complete the execution, here the programmer is responsible to correct all these errors. So something like I have given a print of within quotes I have mentioned hello and I forgot to close the quotes. If I forgot to close the quotes also, it throws a syntax error. So these are all the syntax errors. So these can be resolved by the programmer. So what is the runtime errors? So runtime errors is while executing a program, if something happens, if something goes wrong, which is something like user entered a invalid input or through some memory problems. So these are all comes under the runtime errors. So something like I have opened a file f is equals to open of, I have opened some file like I opened file like a.txt. So this is a file I have opened. If this file a.txt file is not there in our dictionary, in our folder, so file not found error, file not found error will raise. So these are all comes under the runtime. Here the syntax is everything is correct, but the file is not available in a folder. So that in such cases we will get a file not found error. So these are all comes under the runtime errors. So runtime errors is also called as an exceptions. So these exceptions need to handle to move the execution smoothly. So to have a continuous flow of execution, we need to handle this kind of runtime errors. So these are all called as an exception handling. These are all handled by the exception handling concept through try or except block. Through try except block. These are handled by exception handling with the help of try except blocks. So what happens? Generally we will discuss about what is the default exception handling. So what is happening in the backside? See, whenever exception is raised. So generally in Python, every exception in Python is a class. So whenever exception is raised, Python virtual machine creates an object. And Python virtual machine will check whenever exception is raised, it will check is there any handling code is available in the program or not. If there is any handling code, so it executes that handling code and makes the execution smoother and executes the rest of the statements and finally it will display the output. Whereas if any handling code is not available, Python virtual machine didn't found any handling code for a corresponding exception, it immediately stops the execution. Means it is called as an abnormal termination. It immediately stops the execution and shows the exception information to the exception information on the console to the user. So whatever the rest of statements will be there. For example, here I'll write print of hello. Next I wrote print of 1 by 10 by 0 and I wrote print of hi. These three statements are there. So this will run smoothly, no problem. Here there is an error of divide 0 divide error, 0 division error. So 0 division error occurs. So what about the statement of last print of hi? This won't execute. Here the termination will stop and the Python virtual machine will show the 0 division error on a screen to the user. So it prints hello and it will show this exception and print of hi will won't get executed. Here this is called as an abnormal termination. So we need to handle this abnormal termination. To prevent abnormal termination exception handling is required by using try and except block. Here what we need to do while to handle exception handling. So first the programmer need to perform the 3 steps. The first step is that if in a code, programmer need to observe in a code, is there any kind of exception is used to raise? Is there any risky code in the program? Those risky code need to be written inside a try block. So the try block syntax is try colon and statements inside a try block. Here we need to write the risky code. So the code which may raise the exception, those code need to be written inside a try block. So if some exception arrives in the try block, the Python virtual machine won't terminate the program. So it will understand that okay, there is an exception has been raised. So it will check for the corresponding handling code. So handling codes will be written in except block. So it will check for the corresponding handling code without terminating the program. So whatever the risky code, whatever the exceptions are raising in our code, those code need to be mentioned in the try block. And the second step is except block. So the programmer should write except block. So it will display the exception details. So it will be in this format: except keyword, space, and exception class name. Except keyword, exception class name. Inside we need to write a statements inside a except block. So this helps the user to understand there is some error in a program. So it can be anything. In the last I mentioned about zero division error, except zero division error. So I already told every exception in a Python is a class. So except zero division I mentioned colon. Here I'll write to make user understand about this error. So don't give zero so that it may raise a zero division error. So this message helps the user programmer to understand if there is an error in a program. These are called as a handler. Except is called as a handler. Why we call it as a handler is since exceptions are raised, these are used to handle those situations. So these are called as a handling. Inside a except block, whatever we write, we call it as a handling code. These are used to handle the situation of a exception raising. So in the third step is lastly the programmer need to do some cleanup activities. Something like if I open any file, I need to close that file. This is one cleanup activity. So if I need to close some other process which was running beyond the onset programmer. So we need to stop that process also. We need to stop that files also. So all these things we need to write in a finally block. So all the cleanup activities or closing activities need to be mentioned inside a finally block. So the finally block syntax is finally colon, and here the whatever the statements we need to write inside finally block, we need to write inside the finally. So these statements inside, whatever the statements inside the finally block will always execute, irrespective of exception raise or not. In try block, if exception raises, if exception won't raise also, the finally block statement will always execute. So except block will execute only if there is any exception raised in a try block, then only the corresponding except block will execute. But in terms of regarding finally will always execute, irrespective whether there is an exception or not. So here is an example. Here a Python program to handle zero division error exception. So here see, so in a try block I have written some code. F equals to open of my file, comma, and I have given a write permission. So my file is a file, text document. So I am opening that file. If that file is not available, if I mention R here, if that file is not available, then it throws error. Here I am giving a write permission. So inside of that file, what I am performing is through keyboard I need to enter two values that need to be stored in a B. And I am performing a division operation, C is equals to A by B. And I am writing that result C value. Here the C value will be written inside a file. So this content will be stored in a file. So I'll show you that. So writing something I like 10 divided by 2. If I give A value as a 10 and B value as a 2, so the result C will hold a value of Result C will hold a value of 5. Here in a file I'll writing 5 into 5. This will be there in our my file. In my file, and finally I'll get this. What happens if through keyboard I am entering A and B values, right? So what happens if I enter B value as 0? So C is equals to 10 by 0. Here it will raise a zero division error. So I already know that it may causes zero division error because of user enter any invalid syntax like this. So I already mentioned that in a except block. So except exception class name zero division error. Exception class name zero division error. So inside I have written statements. Inside I have written some statements like print division by 0 is happened. Please do not enter 0 in the input. So this helps a user, a programmer to understand, okay, if I press 0, there is some error is raising. This is for the user understanding purpose. And finally the block, final block. So I already opened a file and I closed that file. I closed the file with the f dot close. So let me show you that. So here is a program to handle zero division error. So this is a code. I'll run the code. So here it is asking enter two numbers. So I'm entering 10, 2. Fine. So see the finally block I wrote file closed. Irrespective of exception, here there is no kind of exception. Then also the statement inside a finally block is executing. So now we will check. See here my file is folder is created. My file text document is created. So which I have mentioned in a program of my file. So when I open this, so writing 5 into 5. So 10 divided by 2 will get a result 5. So that is have been written in a file. So now again I will run the program. See now I will enter B value as a 0. Let's see what is going to happen. Enter two numbers. So I will enter first value as a 10 space. Here in the program I mentioned we have to split the values with the space. I am entering 0. See, it is a zero division error. Division by 0 happened. Please do not enter 0. See again file is closed. So finally block statements are always executed irrespective of error in exception in try block or not. So here we written these two statements inside the except block, that is division by 0 happened. Please do not enter 0 in the input. So this corresponding try block has been executed. So now let's see about what is a complete exception handling syntax in a Python. So we have a try at the starting. Inside a try we need to write a risky code. Wherever the code used to raise an exception, those code need to be written in a try block to make the execution smoother. To make continuous flow of execution, we need to write those exception raising code in a try block. And we know already what are the exceptions are going to raise with this code. So then we need to write the corresponding handling code in a except block. So with the keyword of except space exception class name. Here I written two exceptions. Except exception 1, inside I am writing handling code, that is a statement for that exception. Next except exception 2, another exception class. Inside I have written a statement for that exception to unhandle. So a try block, in a try block we have a code, right? So that code, a try block can have 0 or more except statements. Because a code may raise more than one exception. So for each and every exception there is a corresponding except block need to execute. So next after except block there is a else. Already we have seen else clause in a if and for loop. So as this how it is supporting for the if and for statements also. Else class is supports for the exception handling through try except block. And finally we have a finally block colon statement. These statements will always execute to make the closing activities. See here is an example to handle multiple exceptions. So just now we have seen that there is a two except blocks for single try block. A single try block can have 0 or more except blocks. See here is an example. So I have created a function average is a function and I'm passing a list as a parameter. List as a I'm passing list as a parameter. So here what I'm doing is I want to calculate the average for that list. So I'm passing a list like 1, 2, 3, 4. So I want to find the average of this. Like first I need to find a sum, and then I need to find total number of elements in a list. Then that is the average formula. So that first I need to get a sum, that is the total elements. So for that first initialize to total equals to 0. So using a for loop for x in a list, each and every iteration x will hold one value from the list, and that will be adding into a total. So finally total will have 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4. Final value will be there, that will be stored in a total. Next average is equals to, so finally we got some value, right? 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1 divided by, and the length of list. Length of list is used to get a number of elements in the list. How many elements are there? So 4 elements are there in this list. So that will be stored here. So finally it is returning total average. It is returning two values, total average. So in the try block, why I mentioned this code is like, if I pass a list, here in this example say, so the list have other than numbers also there is a string is also there. How it perform addition operation with the integer and a string? It throws an error. It throws a type error. If we need to perform any kind of arithmetic operations between strings and integers, it throws a type error. So if there is a possibility of occurring a type error also. So that's why we have written this code in a try block. So t comma a, it has written the two values, two variables, total and average. So t comma a equals to average. I'm calling a function. This is a calling function. I'm calling a function and passing a list. So I'm printing the total and average. So here the corresponding except block for the type error. So what will happen if I pass an empty list? If I pass empty list, here in the formula, so total by, so length of the list is 0. So there may be a chance of 0 division error. So these two errors may occur with this program. So these two exceptions were written in the two different except blocks. A try has two different except blocks. One is a except type error, another one is a except space 0 division error. So inside a type error, I am printing like, so please provide a numbers. It is a type error. You are provided something like string. So only integers need to be provided. So please provide numbers with the information will be print to the programmer. 0 division error, please don't give an empty list. That is also information we are passing to the programmer or a user who are using this program. So don't pass an empty list. If you pass an empty list, it might cause a 0 division error. So these two exceptions were handled by the except block. So let me show you that. So here is a program for handling multiple exceptions. Here they say the two exceptions. So I am running the program. So the type error, please provide numbers. So because here we are passing a string and passed integers in a list. List can accept any type of data, but when we are trying to perform any arithmetical operations, we need to have only one type of data. So if I remove and I pass 3 as a 3 into a list. So now I got a value total equals to 13, average is 2.6. What happens if I pass an empty list? Let's see. So I already seen what happens if I pass an integer along with a string, only integers. So now we'll see if I pass an empty list, the corresponding 0 division error need to be replaced. See, 0 division error, please don't give empty list. So now we'll see what is about except block. There are different ways to represent except block. We already know what is except block. Except block is useful to catch exception that is raised in a try block. So it is used to catch the exception that is raised in a except block. Whenever there is an exception, the corresponding except block need to be executed. We can write try block without except also, but when Python virtual machine finds any kind of exception, If there is no corresponding except block, it directly terminates the program. So these are also abnormal terminations. So whenever exception is raised, we need to write a corresponding except block in a Python program. See here, there are various formats to write except block. So first thing is except block with exception class name. Except block with exception class name, except keyword and space exception class. Like I told, except type error. So type error is one exception class. So we can write like this. Inside of this, we can write a statements. So another one is except exception class and passing an object. Something like except zero division error. Zero division error is an exception class as, and I am passing a object as message. So this message will have a description about a exception that is going to display on the console. Next, another way is to catch multiple exceptions. In the last example, we have seen so multiple except blocks are there. So we can write multiple except blocks in a single except block also. We can write multiple except block, or we can write a single except block to handle multiple exceptions. See, we can write multiple exceptions using a single except block. We can enclose within a tuple parenthesis. Within a tuple parenthesis, we can write more than one exception also instead of writing multiple except blocks. So there is another format also to catch any kind of exception. We need not to write what is the exception class name there. See, if a program may have multiple exceptions, already there is multiple exception hierarchy will be there in exception handling. To catch any kind of exception, we simply write except. Simply write except colon and write the information inside that except block. This is used to catch any kind of exception. So catching specific exceptions in a Python. See here in this program, a try block can have 0 or more except blocks. Multiple except blocks allows us to handle each exception differently. So here there is a 2 except blocks. So here try, I've passed a list 2, 4, 6, 8. So list index starts with 0, 1, 2, 3. So here I am trying to print index of 5. So but in the given input, list is having only index up to 3. Here 5 index is not available in the given list. Here we are trying to access the list which is not available. Here we are trying to access a list of index which is not available in the given list. So automatically it is a index error. So corresponding except block will execute whatever the statements inside a index error, that is going to execute. This zero division error is skipped. So that is what catching specific exception in a Python. A try have more than one except block, but corresponding except block only execute. The rest of except blocks will be skipped. So here the output is index out of bound because of we are trying to access element which is not available in the given list. So that is the index error. The corresponding except block index error will execute. And inside the index error, there is a statement of print index out of bound. So that is going to print on the screen. So try with else class. So already we know about what is an else class. So generally else class is used in if statements and for loop. So if statements and for loop we are generally used to use else. In if statement, how else class is going to execute? If condition is satisfied, if I wrote condition I is less than 10, I value is 8, so print of I, else print none. So here the else statement, else class or none is going to execute if this condition is fails. In if condition is fails, then only the else class is going to execute. Whereas in a for loop, else class is always execute. But in a for loop, if we have any break statement, then else class won't execute. So likewise, else is also supported in exception handling also. So how it is going to execute, like else is always followed by except block. else we need to write after the except block only. So else statement executes only if there is no exception in the try block. In try block, if there is no exception, then only the else statements are going to execute. In try block, if there is an exception, the corresponding except block statement is going to execute, but else class is skipped at that time. See here in the example, there is no chance of executing except block and else block simultaneously. So only either of the one statement will execute. In try block, if there is exception, then the corresponding except block statements will execute. If try block, if there is no kind of exception, if there is no error in the try block, automatically else class is going to execute whatever the statements we write inside else class. See here, this is a program. Here I am trying to write f is equals to open f.txt and I mentioned the read mode. So if there is a chance that if f1.txt file is not available in our directories, in our folders, automatically there is a issue of locating that file. So that is one kind of exception that we mentioned in the except block. If suppose already file is available, I already created a file of f1.txt in my directory, so automatically there is no kind of exception at all in the try block. Automatically else class will execute. See, what was the statements in else class is file will be open and whatever the contents will be there in the file that is going to read. After that, I need to write inside a file, I need to write bvrit plus nav support. So this will be output like bvrit nav support. This line I need to write in a file of f1.txt. So this will execute. After that, finally block is going to execute. Obviously, if a file is available, this statement will print true and it will close the opened file. Even though the exception is raised, finally block will always execute. So this is how else class will work. So for the after else class, the final block is the finally block. The finally keyword is available in a Python to close all the activities in the try except block statements. So the obviously finally is used after try except finally. So we can use finally after except block or directly we can use after try block also. This is also valid. So try can have without any except also, that is also valid. But when we are trying to write else must always return after except try, else always return after except block only. So finally will be written after try or after except block after else also. These three formats are valid. So the finally block will always execute irrespective of exception is raised or not also. The finally block statements, whatever the statements are there inside a finally block, it always executes. Here is a program like try block I mentioned divided equals to 4, floor division 0 and I am printing that div value. So a corresponding error we already know that I have mentioned except block 0 division error. So you are trying to divide it by 0. That is a message you are passing to a programmer. And final print, this is code is a finally class. So irrespective of exception raise or not, this statement will always execute and will print on the screen. So thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.